Well, hello, everybody out there in our viewer world of the Progress Report. Here it is, the first day of May, folks. You may not believe it by the thermometer, but it is the first day of May, and it's always nice because at this time of year, Lou, when we get out of here, it's still light out.
We're happy.
We're happy with that. As time goes on, I appreciate driving in the daytime more, and then the nighttime not so much, and we can do that now. So we have a very, I think, good program lined up for tonight, not only because it's the first Wednesday of the month, is my good friend Lou D'Alessandro sitting next to me, which is always a great pleasure.
Thank you.
The Dean of the Senate, and the real relevant for tonight's discussion, the Chair of the Senate Finance Committee. And our guest is Steve Shurtleff of Concord. And Steve is, I pleased to say, and I hope it's true, a real good friend. Consider him a very good friend of mine.
Absolutely.
And Steve has served in the State House and the City of Concord. He's been a city councilor for quite a while, right?
11 years.
11 years. And how long have you served in the State House?
This is my 15th year, Bob.
15th year.
Yeah.
And since I've been there, he's been the majority leader and the minority leader. The majority leader was more fun. And this year, our caucus, which had the majority, elected him the Speaker of the New Hampshire House, and he's presiding with good humor and a calming manner, which is sometimes very, very appropriate. Steve has a long career in law enforcement. He was the U.S. Marshal. He's a Vietnam War veteran, and I've left out a whole bunch of things I could tell about you, Steve, but it's you've had a long and good career in many areas, and
I've been fortunate.
You've been fortunate, and we're fortunate that you've been in New Hampshire and being part of our the public service that you offer is very valuable to the state of New Hampshire. So we're really delighted that you're here, and it's very timely because we have the state budget. Probably everybody knows that we only do the budget's a 2-year budget, a biennial budget, so it only happens every other year that we have to deal with framing the state budget. And this is that year. And so by the time June rolls around, and certainly by the time June ends and we get July, we're required to have a balanced state budget. And nobody works harder on that than Lou D'Alessandro. And the Speaker has a lot to do with that because, among other things, he appoints members of all the committees. And the House Finance Committee, just like the Senate Finance Committee, is the committee that really crafts the budget. And we'll want to talk about that. I just had to start with one thing, though, that just has astounded and really distressed me. The opposition party has recently taken to saying on the floor of the House through their membership that taxes are theft. I think you should think about that, everybody. They claim that taxes are theft. The first time I heard it from a certain member from Merrimack, I thought, oh, that's just a one-off. That's just somebody going, really off the deep end. Then that was repeated several times. And yesterday in our committee hearing, one of the members representing the minority party arrived with a lapel pin that said that, taxes are theft. Now, here we have two distinguished public servants, and I just wonder, how can this be? If the IRS building has been emblazoned on the top of it, taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilized society. And that's absolutely true. If you think about it, even though we may not like paying our taxes to the state or the federal government or our municipal governments, without that, we would not have the ties that the things that bind us together in a civil society. The fire department doesn't come for free. The police don't come when you need them for free. That's all funded through our taxes. Our obligation to provide and educate the next generation of young people so that they can be contributing citizens, that's something that we have to do as a society. And I just think this is really distressing that we have the two major parties in this state and this country, and at least one of them has gone to the point of saying taxes are theft, which is, of course, blatantly untrue. No society exists without taxes. As they say, death and taxes are the only certain things in life. And of the two, I think taxes are better.
If you had a choice.
I don't have a choice on one.
Well,
if I did. So
we all have to meet one of those.
If not both.
Right, eventually.
So I just really had to
yeah,
get that
yeah,
off my chest. And if anybody wants to participate and call in and say what they think of the fact that we have a political party who's made it a slogan, apparently a slogan approved at the highest level of their leadership, to go around saying taxes are theft, I'd love to hear from you. Our call-in number is not changed. It's still 640-3091. And if you want to participate on that or on other issues, we'll certainly welcome you. Well, having got that said, and I hope you agree with me on that, I wanted to turn to Steve and say, he, as the speaker, he has a very unique role. He is, as I already mentioned, he gets to appoint the chairs and vice chairs of all the committees, and indeed all the members of the committees. He has to supervise the entire State House staff. And at one point, I heard him say something that really struck me. He said, you know, my job is to protect the minority. And I'm saying, wait a minute. He was elected with all Democratic votes. There were no Republican votes for him. And he's been the majority leader, the minority leader for the Democratic Party. And now he becomes a speaker, and he says, my job is to protect the minority. And I thought I might ask you about that, Steve.
Sure.
Why you would say that and
Sure.
what it means.
Well, it's something I truly believe. I had to speak at a Democratic function the other night, and I told the group that night, I'm a Democrat and I'm the Speaker of the House, but I'm not the Democratic Speaker of the House. I am the Speaker of the House who happens to be a Democrat. And we have a Democratic leader, we have a Republican leader, so the parties are well led and have good leadership. My job is really to be, I look at it as being more on the British parliamentary system, to be the honest broker and try to work between the two parties. I'm a Democrat, and there's certain values that I hold near and dear to me because of my democratic philosophy and things that my parents brought me up to believe. But in the House itself, I mentioned to a group of Democrats, and I know some were very surprised and some were disappointed, when I said my primary role as Speaker is to protect the rights of the minority members of the House. And I believe that. We as Democrats right now have the majority, and most of the votes go our way. The bills and the things we want to see pass do pass. But the Republican members of the House have a right to be heard and express their views, and I will lean over and give them a little bit more leeway in order to achieve that goal.
That's really interesting, and I think maybe a lot of people are surprised to hear that, but it's true and very important. And we hope out of this we will develop a certain level of comedy and good feeling between us. It's not always there, and it's lots of stresses, but what we can do, and I think that's a perfect example of the kind of thing that can be done that really helps out. So I think we maybe ought to get into the state budget, because that's the big issue before the legislature today, particularly before the New Hampshire Senate, because the House has passed its version of the budget. Did a lot of interesting and good things, but in my opinion, very good things, but it's now in the hands of Lou D'Alessandro and the Senate Finance. Where are we at, Lou?
Well, we're working. We've started our hearings, and we've gone through the departments. We'll continue to go through the departments, and we'll bring some of them back for a second look. We'll have public hearings in the House of Representatives on Tuesday, beginning at 1 o'clock, and then on Wednesday evening we'll be here in Manchester at 7 o'clock in the Aldermanic Chamber. We look at the good work done by the House, and I always appreciate the work done by the House. Senate has a distinct advantage in one case. We look at the revenues as they are currently, where they had to look at the revenues early on, had to look at the governor's revenues that came very early, and then their revenues which succeeded them, but again, we're quite early. We've got the March and April revenues that are in now. March and April are the key months for the payment of taxes in the state of New Hampshire. The revenues are good. Revenues look really good, and the governor's budget person came into Senate Ways and Means today and said that $60 million more in the governor's the governor's appraisal of the budget situation in terms of revenues. The revenues have come in very well, particularly the business taxes and the I&D. So we're in a much better position to look at the budget. and in a much better position to fund things that may
Boy,
have been
that's
missed by the
that's
House.
a real eye opener. 60 million
With 30
in
million a year.
increased
Yeah.
revenue in the revenue estimates for the
Yeah.
next biennium.
Well, I think again you have a better picture because of the March and April. Things are things are good in the state of New Hampshire. We're not saying that they're just magnificent, but they're leveling off. We received the money from the anomaly, and that was the repatriation money that came across. Our taxes are in pretty good shape. I think we have to keep the business taxes at the current level, the 7.9%. That's a very important issue as far as this budget's concerned. And we've got to look at the Health and Human Services area. The area of mental health has to be dealt with. DCYS have to be dealt with, and we can provide, I think, an opportunity for the state of New Hampshire to do really good things in this budget process. And if we could do that, we're serving the people of the state of New Hampshire. To get to your original comments, that's what taxes do. They serve people. I think people should be happy to pay a fair tax. We all should be willing to pay a fair tax because of the benefits that we receive. In the area of public health, in the area of mental health, I mean, all of these services that we provide have to be paid for. And we do that, the common good. And I think you articulated that perfectly when you said your job as the Speaker of the House is to represent everybody. That's the majority and the minority, and that's what a good speaker does. And a good speaker brings them together at the appropriate time and shows them the leadership that they need. The herd needs to be led.
Right.
And no question about that. And I think when a person is able to represent both fairly, then what you've done is the job of government. That's how a democracy works. The parliamentary system is one thing. We've accepted something a little bit different, but indeed we have to make it work. And with this large House, the 400-member House and the 24-member Senate, not easy. I don't envy your job. As I said to you this morning, as Kermit the Frog said, it ain't easy being green. It just is. It's not easy. It's not easy, but we've got to do it, and we have to move forward. The budget is a document that affects every person in the state of New Hampshire. It's the most significant piece of legislation that we attempt to pass, and pass in good form. And this trailer bill that all of a sudden became part and parcel of the process has become even more significant because there's more legislation in that trailer bill than in some instances stuff that we have done for the whole year.
You can be really surprised when you're
Yes.
chairing as one of the regular committees, as I do, Science, Technology, and Energy, and you think you've got this problem solved. Oh, there's a note in the trailer bill that completely changed what you guys are trying to do.
Well, the trailer bill's very interesting. This particular one, very interesting, and we got to work with it. But as the Speaker knows, this situation will come down to the Senate will pass a piece of legislation. We will go to committee of conference. The mark of a good legislative process is when you go to that committee of conference and you reconcile your differences, because we're going to have differences. We're going to have different ways of approaching a solution. But indeed, if the solution is really what we want, there are many ways to get there. There's not just one way to get there, and I think that's how the process should work. I've been on the committee conference for a number of times, and sometimes it works, sometimes it hasn't worked. But we have to work. We have to work to get that done.
Well, you described the process very well up to the point where you're crafting the Senate version of the
Right.
budget, and we're having a conference committee, but that's not the end of the line, is it, Speaker Shurtleff? We have the governor has the
Yep.
final say,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
And have either of you been in touch with the governor about?
No, I haven't met. I was meeting with the governor fairly regularly, but that's kind of dropped off, and I haven't really met with him for the past month or so. So I'm not really sure where he is at on a lot of this. One thing I would say, Bob, is that we're very fortunate in the House that we've got Mary Jane Wallner chairing the House Finance, and
Yes.
we've got Lou chairing the Senate Finance. And I've seen them work together before on budgets, and they have a good relationship and
Yes.
in mutual respect. And that goes a long way when you're trying to forge a budget that everybody's going to be happy with. It's even a little bit bigger hurdle for Lou. he's got to see what are the House Democrats going to think of the budget he comes up with,
Yeah,
as
right.
well as our Republican governor. So it puts even more pressure on him. But the right person's in the right position on dealing with this budget in the Senate.
Of course, the governor is going to have a very big say here because he can veto the budget.
Yes.
Yes.
That has happened in our history. I don't know how often. It's not all that common, fortunately, but it happened when now Senator Hassan was governor.
Right.
She vetoed a budget. It was over the very same thing that Lou just mentioned. Reducing the rate on the business taxes, the business profits and business enterprise taxes. And I heard Lou say that as far as he's concerned, and I know Mary Jane Wallner in the House Finance would strongly agree with this, this is not the time to make that next level of cuts, which is already included in our current law, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And one thing we'll be doing in the House, I anticipate June 13th when we meet, we'll be passing a continuing resolution just in the event that we don't have a budget come July 1st. But it's my hope and desire that we will not have to have that go into effect, that a compromise will be met with the governor.
So, Lou, let me look to you and talk about the revenue. You've talked about the revenue estimates, and
Yes.
those certainly look very positive.
Yes.
But how about the revenue streams that are projected in the House budget? Which ones do you think are going to be the most controversial in the Senate?
Well, I think the House estimates were quite low, to be honest with
They
you.
were.
They were quite low, and as a result, the key areas are the business taxes. They were low in the business taxes. I think the others, the rooms and meals, real estate transfer, I&D, these are all pretty manageable, and we can come to, I think, a compromise on those revenue sources. But I think the fact that the business tax revenues estimates were so low, and we got a big bump in our tobacco settlement money. Mm-hmm. Our insurance tax came in strong, very strong. It looks like securities are coming in strong. So we have some things that took place that really were not anticipated. And the key is, will they continue? I mean, that's obviously it's guesswork at this time, but you like to make educated guesses, and that's what we do. And by looking at the March and April returns, you have a better opportunity to look at those things. And there have to be a few changes in our law. We're talking about, for example, marrying our tax laws with the national government because of the big change that took place during the Trump administration. The I don't know what he called the bill, but the tax reform bill, etc.
Right.
So do we link with that? Right now we're linked into the taxes, I think, in 2015 or 2016. So we have an opportunity to do something along those lines now. There's a new concept as far as revenues is concerned. It's market-based sourcing, which is a very significant piece of legislation. We studied it for a couple of years. We had it over in our Ways and Means. We shipped it over to the House. I think Major and Abrami were working on this, and Susan Elmy's working on this. 31 of the states have moved in this direction. We're eventually going to have to move in this direction if we're going to keep consistent and protect our taxpayers. So those things have happened, and as a result of that, we have to look at those things because in the long run, they will produce more revenue for the state of New Hampshire. It's just how do you get them in? And when do you get them in? And when does the revenue begin to flow? So we have to work with the revenue administration people to talk about that. But crafting a budget in New Hampshire is, listen, when you're anticipating revenues 2 years in advance, even if you do it at the last possible moment, it's still a strong, educated guess.
Yeah.
We use the Department of Revenue Administration, and I think we have some great people over there. Very strong Department of Revenue Administration. We use the Legislative Budget Office, which is in a group of very capable people who work closely with us. But when I chaired Ways and Means in the Senate, the guy who had the job similar to mine in Massachusetts was Senator Pangiatakis from Lowell. He had a staff of 20
Yeah.
I have a staff of a half a person,
Yeah.
and we're doing basically the same job. Now, naturally, their revenues are much higher, but indeed, the process is really what it's all about, and you need the best information that you can gather. And in New Hampshire, we depend upon people who come in and testify for us, and we don't pay them anything. We ask for them to come in as a public obligation to give us their opinions on where we go. So we rely on a lot of things, and really we don't do a bad job, but we can't predict an anomaly. We just can't do it, and indeed we had our little tax forgiveness program, our amnesty program. Who knew that amnesty would produce $19 million? Were those people who weren't paying their taxes? Were those people who didn't realize that they had a tax liability? But they were out there. Mm-hmm. Those people have been found now. And because of the reduction in the rate from 8.5 to 7.9, they're paying their taxes. We also have, in our budget, in your budget, auditors, 2 more auditors. Right. Well, we have 2 companies who failed to pay $500,000 in taxes. $500,000 in taxes. Well, we're going to fine those people. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Why should you pay your taxes? Steve pay his, I pay mine, and these people avoid the taxes?
Yeah.
Tax avoidance is something that we have to get after. And I think when people recognize that we're all in this together, we all have a responsibility. It's a lot easier to do. But it's a challenge, and it's a challenge because of the nature of the business. And the most significant thing is the biennial budget. Yeah. We changed the Constitution to have annual sessions so that they would have annual budgets. But we negated that. We threw that out.
Why is that, Lou?
I can't figure it out, to be honest with you.
Could we do something to change that?
Well, sure. I mean, we could just say we're going to have annual budgets.
Wow.
We could make that decision.
Are we doing all right with our biannual budgets?
Well, we're doing okay, but
And would you really want to do this every year?
Well, I think if you did it every year, you'd have to make some significant changes. But look at last year. We passed House Bill 1817, which in reality was a supplemental budget.
Right.
And we spent a lot of money because things were going good, and hopefully we went to the right places at the right time and did some good things. But we have done supplemental budgets in the second year. Yeah. But indeed, a biennial budget is something that we've accepted, something we continue to do. But I think the problem when you go from biennial to annual sessions, and maybe the speaker can help me with this, the same damn bills come up in the second year.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not what it's all about. But it repeats itself all the time, and you're going through the same stuff. You re-refer, take it in the second year, re-refer. I mean, come on. That's I think that's one of the negatives of the session when you're not doing what one would say the annual budget.
It's hard too, isn't it, Lou, for the department heads to try to look into their crystal balls.
Yeah, sure.
And I think Commissioner Sheehan from Department of Transportation and Commissioner Scott from Environmental Services, who both do excellent jobs, but to look ahead. And all of a sudden, next year, if you have a strong spike in gas prices and diesel, that's going to impact DOT, and they'll have to come back for a supplemental or go to fiscal.
Sure.
Or we have a heavy winter.
Right.
I mean,
or you have the pollution of the PFOAs and
there you go.
Merrimack,
Right. All of a sudden,
a big landfill,
water problem,
all those things. You got.
And indeed, in the DOT situation, you have a bad winter.
Right.
Not enough money in the budget, so they come back to the fiscal committee. And then there are people who say, why should 10 people, 5 from the House and 5 from the Senate, why should they make these key votes for the state? How many times have you heard that?
Oh, please.
Ad infinitum. And I've been on the fiscal committee for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And yet, it's the mechanism that we chose for that interim period.
Right, exactly. Otherwise, the roads don't get plowed. I mean,
so we make these decisions, and they then, as we say, they are what they are.
Yeah.
We kind of move forward.
Well, as the old saying goes, predictions are very hard, especially about the future. And we
Yes.
have a
I would say that's
two-year
true.
window that we've got. Was that Yogi Berra? Sounds like him.
Look at Bartlett to
right.
find out where that came from.
Let's take a quick break here, folks, if we can. When we come back, I want to ask Lou about one of the more, I think, for some people at least, controversial parts of the House budget, the addition of a capital gains component to the interest and dividends tax. Let's see what he thinks about that. And again, we hope you'll join in 640-3091 if you'd like to participate. We'll be right back. Hi, folks. This is the May 1st, yes, May 1st edition
May
of the
Day.
Progress.
May Day.
It's
Oh,
May
yeah.
Day.
May Day.
Get that maypole out and dance
Okay.
around.
Think about Catholic school.
Ah, yes. Oh, yeah.
May 1st.
Yeah.
The processions and everything.
Boy,
Oh, boy.
brings back memories.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And those that like it, Cinco de Mayo's coming right up.
Right.
You like your margaritas and
Right.
Mexican.
Yeah,
We have the taco tour coming up in Manchester pretty soon, don't we?
I've heard about this. Is it this coming weekend?
It's a really great event.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a terrific
They
event.
changed the name on that, I
Yeah.
understand. But it's a great, I've heard it's 68 different booths or something.
Yeah, they even had one that had tacos for your pet.
Oh, my goodness. That's only in Manchester.
Only in
They do
Manchester.
it all here.
We have a wonderful mayor. Things are
do.
going
She does a
great
great
here.
job.
Yeah.
She's terrific.
So we are talking with my good friend and my first Wednesday of the month co-host Lou D'Alessandro, who also has the very tough job of being chair of Senate Finance. And our guest is, we're very pleased to say, is Speaker Steve Shurtleff, who presides over the New Hampshire House this term as the Speaker after serving many years as occasionally minority leader, occasionally majority leader. But now he's in charge of us all and trying
Now
to
I'm
keep
making
us.
the extra money as
Now
speaker.
you're
The
making-
extra
Right, that extra
25% a year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Which sounds better than saying $25
Yeah,
a year.
He gets an extra $25 a year. Whether I don't even if he doesn't have to work that hard, he still
No,
gets it.
still take it.
But he does have to work hard. So we were talking about the budget, and we were kind of mostly talking about the revenue side. And one thing that's come up that's sure to be controversial, it's already got a lot of people weighing in, is the idea of adding a capital gains component to the interest and dividends tax. And how do you think that's going to fare on the Senate side, Lou?
Well, I think it's going to have a rough trip.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's going to have a rough trip. And the House took the revenues estimated at 150 in the second year, 30 in the first year, and wove them around an education. And really, I think did a very good job. Kudos to Mary Heath and her guys, her gang, for what they did for education. She's the most committed person I know.
Oh, she does a wonderful job.
To education. And when she was deputy commissioner, I worked with her. I was chairman of finance, and we did some things. It's it's problematic, Bob, because I think we could do it without a capital gains tax. And I mean that's what I think at the present time. I could be proven wrong, but at this time, I think my sense is to build a budget without that, and a budget that gives money back to the communities, eliminate the earmarks that the governor put, and give money back to everybody, so that every community in this state will share.
What do you mean by lowering the property taxes would otherwise
Well,
may
no,
have to
they
be
could use
collected?
the money to lower the property taxes. They could use the money that we give for
Whatever,
whatever
okay.
they want. They're going to have that option, and it will look like I'm trying to mold it like a revenue sharing model, but not revenue sharing. So I'm trying to create a pool of money to send back. We want to do a job for education. I know how important education is. I've spent my entire life in education. And youngsters who have a quality education have a better chance to succeed in this life. And in our town, for example, Manchester, we've got a problem with education. We've got to solve it, and I think the mayor's working hard to do it, and we're going to work hard to do it. So education's a very significant issue. The House did a good job with education. We'll try to work hard to do what we can't do it the same way, and I don't think we could do as much, but we could do what everybody wants. We want kindergarten, and we want kindergarten funded. We want to take sustainability and push it back into the budget. We don't want to reduce it. Remember, if you follow this pattern, you reduce it by another 4%. We don't want that. I would like to keep the 4%, and by not reducing it 4%, you're really increasing it by 8%. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that we have to weave together. We have really high demands, health and human services. The rates for the facilities, for the nursing homes, the public, all right, the rates have to be increased.
Right.
We know that.
It's been many years since they've been increased.
Years. Fortunately, there'll be more pro-share for the public nursing homes. That's a real bonus, and the counties receive that, and it's based on the differential between what one rate is and what another rate is, and so forth. So those things have happened, and they're all positives, but they have to be dealt with. Department of Transportation got to deal with this unbelievable issue, in my opinion. If you bond a vehicle for 20 years, who ever heard of bonding a vehicle for 20 years?
Yeah.
All right, we've got to get away from that.
It's the same as getting a 20-year car loan.
Right. It is. Yeah. I mean, that vehicle is dead buried after a period of time. But so we got to work. We have to work with that. So there are so many things that we have to work with, and we're going to do that. Got a good committee, and everybody is I think working together at this point in time. But we had a good base to start with. Okay, we're looking at the House. When you look at the detailed change reports that the House sent over, there's significant change there. Very significant change. So you got to get into that, and you say this is appropriate for our plan. This isn't appropriate, but at least you have something to go on.
Yeah. Which
I think is important. And we have what the governor presented. We have what the House presented, and now we have an opportunity to work on it and to work with our department heads.
I'd like to ask the Speaker to just talk a little bit about the House Finance proposal for capital gains tax and how that would actually work. Because I think people, well, let's face it, I don't like the idea that people are saying taxes are theft, but there's a lot of resistance to anything with the name tax on it or even fee. I mean, a lot of people get real excited about that, and they don't want to see fees or taxes increase. And we've never had anything called a capital gains tax in New Hampshire. We really don't have an income tax, except we kind of do for the interest and dividends tax. A little bit of an income tax on a part of some people's income. So tell us about what this capital gains tax would mean.
Well, first of all, a lot of credit goes to Representative Dick Ames from Jaffrey. He's the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and he did a lot of work on this bill and a lot of fine-tuning. And what it does, Bob, it extends the interest and dividends tax to include capital gains. New Hampshire is one of the few states that doesn't have a capital gains tax, and we know a lot of people use New Hampshire as a residence because of that. It would have generated, as Lou said, 30 million, then 150 million next year, with the intent of that money going to schools and trying to help lower our local property tax rates. That's one of the biggest complaints we get as legislators and as a city council that I hear. The property taxes keep going up, and especially for our elderly, that their homes aren't generating any income, and it's hard on them.
Yes.
Dick's bill would have brought in a lot of money, and I think it was 4,600 people that would have been impacted by this tax. But
And these would all obviously be very high-end
oh, absolutely,
in wealth and income of
there
our
was
population.
what their annual income, there was caps, there was plateaus in which it would kick in for those individuals. As I said, with 4,600 people having this tax applied to them, the vast majority of people in New Hampshire would not have to worry about having to pay this. But it did close, we felt, a loophole, and it brought necessary revenue back to local communities to help with their property taxes. And while I'm in Manchester, just let me add that I'm sorry to see that the Manchester teachers are still out of contract, and I do hope the school board will get back to the negotiating table and give them a fair and decent contract, which they deserve.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I certainly hope so too. So, in other regards, Lou and Steve, the budget that we're going to get, I guess, changes will be made. Obviously, we're not that close to the finish line yet, although we got to be finished by the end of June. Some of our other real priorities are going to get addressed here, aren't they? I mean, the mental health crisis.
Yes.
That's a huge thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And the youth services division of youth
Right.
services.
DCYF, big deal.
Big deal, right?
Very, very big deal.
And what are some of the other things that are particularly satisfying to either of you about what this budget may do? You talked about we're going to try and send money back to the cities and towns. And boy, that's long overdue. We had a long time where we were doing that as a regular part of our budgeting process, and then starting in 2010 with the O'Brien years, that just ended. And,
We did the opposite. We started downshifting instead of sending revenue.
Yeah.
In the state retirement was a prime example of during the O'Brien years for Group 2 and teachers. That 25% all of a sudden falling on cities and towns.
Yeah,
It really hurt.
yeah,
Oh, it hurt.
And so unexpected.
yeah. And as Lou taught me a long time ago, we do have a broad-based tax in the state. It's called the property tax. And
Right.
where we don't meet our responsibility as state legislators, those needs don't go away.
No.
Too often, they just get loaded down on the local welfare rolls and otherwise loaded onto the backs of the needs that have to be met through the property tax.
Well, and indeed, if we are able to solve some of these problems, they do have an effect on the property tax, because the locals don't have to pay more if indeed the state's participating and supplying the monies to take care of these particular situations. And that's why dealing with mental health it's a significant item. It's an important item. Dealing with children, DCYF, and helping take care of children when the need arises, rather than late in the game when local communities have to come up with all of that money. What we call it catastrophic aid. So those are the kinds of things that we can alleviate. And revenue sharing began in 1970 when Walter Peterson chose, through the commission, the Sanders Commission, chaired by Royden Sanders.
That's when we really established the tax system we have today.
Exactly. And you took the stock and trade, or the inventory tax, and converted it. And part of that deal was, as a result of that, the cities and towns would participate in the business profits tax and get a percentage of it based on what their taxes were under the old stock and trade. And as you say, we haven't done that for a long period of time, and that's something that in every one of my gaming bills, and I hate to bring these up, Mr. Speaker, because the House crushes me.
I think I heard this before. Go right ahead. This is why I get the extra $25.
They just crush me. But I always put in revenue sharing.
Right.
Because I recognize the fact that revenue sharing can help abate increases in property tax. And it's fulfilling a commitment. And, God rest Walter Peterson's soul. I think one of the great governors in the history of this state. Cared about people, did everything he could, and his tax reform, major piece of legislation that has allowed the state of New Hampshire to proceed forward, without the dreaded income or sales tax. It was through Walter's hard work and the Sanders Commission that all of this happened. So we ought to try to help out and fulfill that commitment, and that's what I would like to do. And we've come a long way in many ways. You never get there because
I just
the
have
process
to. I
never
just
ends.
have to add Joe Millimet's name to that.
Oh, Joe was
distinguished list,
terrific.
because he worked very, very closely with the governor and with Sanders on that, and very able, fine lawyer, and
Terrific.
and
Joe was.
He was my first mentor when I came
Really?
to Manchester. I started at
Divine and Millimet.
Divine Millimet,
Yeah.
and I'd be so fond of Joe. He had so many wonderful
Great
attributes.
Yeah, he did.
He was really a
Yeah,
wonderful
Joe
guy.
was-
And you're absolutely right. Walter Peterson is one of our great
His
governors.
legacy
without a
is
doubt.
still living in
Yes.
the state, and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
fortunate he was governor.
Yep, we're very fortunate.
I just got to say, Bob, you mentioned mental health, and I know something that
Yeah.
Lou believes in is this idea of community mental health and the mobile crisis centers.
Centers,
And New Hampshire set the tone for the rest of the country. We were the model in 1980, 81.
We were.
When we deinstitutionalized, and people were looking at New Hampshire and our legislation
Right.
to do the following thing, and we had the federal funds coming in, and over the years we lost our way. And a lot of those people that were filling all those buildings at what now is the Gallen Office Park, they're now in our state prisons and county jails, and we've got to find a way. And it's just all we're doing is paying more money to warehouse them in prisons than it would have cost to have them in a hospital, but they're not getting the benefits, and we got to break that cycle.
I wanted to ask you both about the governor's proposal to do what I think you correctly described, Lou, is earmark a bunch of things.
Right.
Take the surplus and not move it through the usual process, but just pick projects here and there. One that was quite popular on first blush was the idea of finally moving our mentally ill people not convicted of any crime, but with a severe mental crisis and needing to be protected and have others protected from them, out of the state prison. That's what they call and build what we call a secure psychiatric unit, or
Right.
SPU. And the governor, I think, wanted to take $26 million and just build that facility. And House Finance said that was not a particularly good idea. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. The governor came up with the figure of $26 million, and that's about all that the House Finance Committee learned about it. It was about a half a paragraph in the budget, just that figure.
Right.
And I know they tried to go through Public Works to find out what was being planned. No information was forthcoming. And in the budget we passed, I think we put $1.3 million in for site studies and develop a plan of where it would be built and what's the best way to do it. And there's somewhat of a domino effect because we do want to move the children out of the New Hampshire hospital. They shouldn't be there.
Right.
Poor Anna Philbrook must be rolling over in her grave to see that.
Yes,
But
because they used to be in a separate
their own
facility
separate unit.
named for her.
named
and,
in her honor
yeah.
for all she did for children. And now they're talking about having to go to Nashua, but even that number, which originally was $5 million, now I understand is up to $7 million.
7 or 8 million.
And we still don't know if that's a contract that the
Right.
state has signed. Who's going to own the property? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's what we had with the secure psychiatric unit. I've been up to the secure psychiatric on visits in law enforcement, and it's a horrible place and should not be there. But we just can't say we're going to spend $26 million without having any idea what we're going to do with that money.
And
and
my
what it's going
understanding,
for.
Steve, is not only do we not have any idea what to do with the money in terms of a building, there was no money appropriated to staff it.
No,
And
Right.
so it was the building.
exactly. Nothing going forward.
Yeah,
Right.
so it really did require something more than that. Okay, well, real good. either of you think of anything else about the budget that you really like and want to see move forward particularly, or what are we left out?
No, I'm just, I feel sorry for Lou, but he's always rose to the occasion to handle the budget. So, we look forward to the House Democrats working with Lou and the Senate Democrats and the other members of Senate Finance and coming up with a budget that we hope the governor will sign. But what his position is on different issues is really unknown right now, so that makes it a little more awkward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been working with the governor's budget officer, Max, and I think
Kudos.
Yeah. House worked with him too. He's a terrific young man, very available. I work with him every day, speak with him every day. He attends all of our hearings, and I think he did for the House also.
He did.
And we've just got to find a way to include the governor. I mean, it's a tripartite situation. You got the House, you got the Senate, and the governor, who's sort of the guy on top. But I think if you bring these three elements together and create a synergy, that it can happen. And I think the one thing the speaker pointed out, which I think is an essential point, is if you're going to make change, you've got to have a plan. And that plan has got to articulate specifically what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and the costs associated with it. You have great ideas. I think great ideas. House had great ideas. The governor's got some great ideas. I hope the Senate has some great ideas. But indeed, unless those ideas are put together in an operational plan, you can't arrive at the desired result, and that's success. And I think that's what's missing right now, the plan, pointed out by the speaker. What about, where's this unit going to be? Location. Architectural renderings. It's going to take a while to build. How big is it going to be? What's the real need? If you build it, they will come. That's true. At one time, we had 3,000 people at New Hampshire Hospital.
I remember that. I remember that. I remember being up there. It was unbelievable. Bedlam is
right.
It was. Right.
Yeah. So let's get the real need and address the need. The people that are in the hospital that shouldn't be there, waiting for treatment. Where are they going to go? Yeah. We talk about transitional housing. We need transitional housing, but it all has to fit into a plan. And then the execution of the plan is key. That's what I think we have to focus in on. That's what we have to sell to the House, sell to the Senate, and sell to the governor. And we did this. We did this when we deinstitutionalized. And indeed, deinstitutionalization came about because of a suit. Yeah. We thank Frida Smith from Salem for the Laconia situation. Right. She was bound and determined to get her child out of Laconia. So we deinstitutionalized, we created the different sections, and initially we funded them.
Yeah.
And we had a program, as you said, that was the envy of the nation. It really was.
It was.
Give Teddy Nardi and Major Wheelock a credit because they were really instrumental in helping put this together. But then we let it go. And as a result, the opioid crisis came. With the opioid crisis is the mental health crisis, and we got to redo it. Got to re-energize, reinvigorate. But we're capable of doing that.
Yeah.
We just have to set our mind to it and put together a good plan that's effective and with certain benchmarks that say we will do things in this time and it will cost them out.
Yeah.
So that we know what it's going to cost.
So what in this budget will really help us deal with the biggest crisis we got in the state right now, according to many, and that is the opioid crisis? We haven't really talked about that, but certainly implementing the first phase of the 10-year mental health plan, much of that is directed toward this exact problem, isn't it?
Exactly. And I always have this theory that, and I truly believe it, that a lot of those that are using drugs are just self-medicating because of mental health issues, drugs and alcohol, because we've dropped the ball along the way to deal with the mental health problem. And this whole thing with the opioid crisis, my heart goes out to the children of these those addicted, and to the grandparents that are now raising a lot of these children.
Yeah.
And Fortunately, because of Narcan and the great job done by our first responders, we're not having the high death tolls. But we know personally, because of things that have happened in the legislature, that people are still dying because of this the problem with addiction. And hopefully we can get it right this time. And the 10-year mental health plan is a big part of that.
Yeah. I heard the presentation on that in the Reps Hall the other day, and I was very impressed by the amount of good work that I think has gone into putting this together. Now, it plans one thing, but as Lou says, now we gotta make it go and fund it and provide the workforce to make it all happen.
Well, one of the things we did in the House when I became Speaker was to make a permanent division within Health and Human Services to deal with mental health legislation, to give it the emphasis it needed. And we're so happy that Jim McKay in Manchester's own Ken Snow is the vice chair of that committee, and they're doing a wonderful job, as they always do.
Two outstanding people.
Yeah.
And I certainly think we have to give some real credit to our former Chief Justice, John Broderick, for his advocacy on this, because of his own personal history in his family has been outstanding.
Absolutely.
He's a real fine person. So in the time we've got left, I wanted to talk to, I think, which is a very happy subject, and that is the coming 200th birthday party for our State House. The State House, which as the sign proudly says, is the oldest state house in which the House of Representatives sits in its original chambers.
In the Senate.
And the Senate.
Also, and
continuously occupied. The oldest continually occupied state house in the United States.
The real Occupy movement.
The real.
The first.
The real.
And I guess you appointed a committee on this. And,
unfortunately, I serve on the bicentennial
you
committee
serve
as
on
well.
it too.
History is near and dear to my heart.
I know, it's wonderful. It is to me too, and it's wonderful to have somebody who cares so much and knows so much of New Hampshire history.
Well, I'm so old. I've seen so much. But,
I don't think you were there when the building was officially opened.
No.
And we've been having a series of really nice events rolling up to this. The commemorating the laying of the cornerstone and the placement of the eagle and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
But the real big one is coming up next month. And tell us about some of the things that are planned.
The week of June 3rd, we're going to have a week-long activities. We had the Supreme Court meet already and hold hearings in the Senate chamber, and they're coming back in May, and we'll be holding another hearing in the House chamber. And it was nice that they went back to the Senate chamber, because that was once the Supreme Court back in the 1870s.
As it was on the U.S. Capitol, too.
Exactly. They shared it.
Met there.
Yeah. But there's going to be week-long activities, all kinds of events. We're going to have reenactors. We're going to myself and the clerk and others will be reenacting the first House session in 1819, and looking forward to that. And every day there'll be something going on at the State House.
Yeah. I always scratch my head when they say this house was the one in which the House and Senate still sit in the original chambers, but there weren't 400 members in the House then.
I think it was 178.
170.
Yeah.
So those chambers had to have been considerably enlarged over the 200 years, right?
They were.
Yeah.
They were. They spread them out. The Senate court stayed pretty much the same, but the House, it's been in the same chamber, but they moved walls and done a few things, but it's the same chamber. In fact, they actually early on in the State House, they moved the wall back 11 feet just to provide more space. So, the old Yankee frugality. But it really is not. And when I walk into that chamber, to think of those who've been there, Franklin Pierce was a former speaker, and Norris Cotton, and
Walter Peterson.
So many distinguished New Hampshire citizens. And those that have visited, from our early presidents to John Wynant before going to England. And mentioning Wynant, I'd be remiss in not thanking Lou publicly for all his help in getting the John Wynant Memorial built in Concord.
Oh, every time I walk down Park Street, I shake his hand.
Do you? That's the only picture I have hanging on my wall is the Governor Wynant, and that's one of the benefits of being Speaker. I can look out my window and look at the monument.
Yeah,
but,
and you were instrumental in getting
he was the prime mover.
Well, Lou was a big help in getting that done.
That was very appropriate, and really glad to see John Wynant. Folks, if you don't know about John Wynant, we've talked about a great governor, Walter Peterson, but another one was definitely John Wynant, who was governor in the 1930s.
Right.
Yeah. 3 terms.
and then was picked by President Franklin Roosevelt to start up the Social Security system.
First director.
First director.
And,
and ambassador to Great Britain during
and
the
then
war.
succeeded
Oh, boy.
Joseph P. Kennedy, who was kind of a
Right.
defeatist in the time when
Yep.
Britain was standing alone. And
Right.
John Wynant became the ambassador to
Right.
the Court of St. James, which is Great Britain, of course.
Right.
And unlike Kennedy, he was staunchly an ally of continuing to resist the Nazis. At
Right.
that point, there wasn't much choice because there was a declaration of war. But apparently, he would actually go out during the Blitz and
Yes.
Walk the streets
around
and help the fire brigades.
Right.
help the fire brigades, and lend spirit to the people. And Steve turned me on to a wonderful book I recommend everybody called Citizens of London.
Citizens of London. Right.
About John Wynant and
Yeah.
Averill Harriman and who's
Edward R. Murrow.
Edward
Right.
R. Murrow,
Yeah.
yes. 3 Americans who had a big role in
Right.
support of Britain in its darkest hour, and or its, as Churchill said, its finest hour. As it
Right.
turned out
That's
to be.
right.
Well,
Finest hour. And I recommend everybody to check out that book, and it's a really fine book. I've never met anybody to feel they benefited and enjoyed reading it. So that's a really good thing. And you did mention that one thing you might like to see is a return of our New Hampshire state constitution to the State House.
Yeah, I've been talking with folks on the Bicentennial Commission, but something I'd like to see, we used to have the state constitution at the State House, and then it was moved up to archives. And I think it'd be so nice. We have the New Hampshire Constitution, and we have our copy of the federal Constitution. And I'd like us to have a secure site in the visitor center with the right temperature controls, so that when the 4th graders come in, they can actually see those original documents, not just the facsimile, but the actual documents. I think it means so much. And to other visitors coming to the State House,
Yeah.
I want to see more of our history put on display for people to see.
Yeah.
And that's my
we
goal.
have the oldest. Do we have the oldest state constitution?
We have the oldest state constitution. Yeah,
largely due to the influence of John Adams. Is that right?
it was
Well,
based on the
Massachusetts
Constitution,
Right.
but we adopted it before Massachusetts.
Oh, is that the way it went?
That's how it
see,
happened.
I'm glad I got a history expert
Oh.
because that's really good to know. I never was quite sure about that. I talked with an author of a wonderful book about the Declaration of Independence, and when I said it's from New Hampshire, all she wanted to do was talk about the New Hampshire Constitution. And
Oh, sure.
how influential it was for the rest of the country.
Absolutely. Well, we were the first one to declare our independence from Britain.
And the ninth state to ratify the Constitution, which was the number required to put it into effect. For
That's
the US
right.
Constitution.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got some great
Wow.
history here in
History.
this state,
Yeah,
don't
we
we?
do, we
and
do.
we got a great historian and speaker, Shurtleff. And
Oh.
thanks for coming
Yeah, for
down.
sure.
It's always
really
a pleasure to see both of you.
And
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Steve.
Lou.
And this,
Thank you. You're
Mike
welcome.
Farley, and I know he's at an AOH meeting and is a member of the Manchester Division. I want to thank him for the great job he does.
I'll mention that to him.
Please do.
Okay, thank you very much. Mike and I'll be back next week, folks. Thanks for watching, and be back with us next week. Take care.